Greetings to all, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and gentlemen, and all our comrades. Today is the World Teachers' Day. My name is Mugwena Maluleke. I am the Vice President for Education International, and my co-host today, as we celebrate this important day for the teachers, is Marie-Jeanne Sakho Dansokho. Hi, Marie-Jeanne.
Hi, Mugwena. Je m'appelle Marième Sakho Dansokho. Je suis membre du comité exécutif de l'International de l'éducation. Merci à tous.
Yeah, Marie-Jeanne, being a member of the executive board of EI, will then be hosting this event with me. This is one of the segments of our World Teachers' Day that is being celebrated globally by all the teachers, all our people in the world. So welcome to the World Teachers' Day 2020, which is celebrated under the theme Teachers Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future. So we want to welcome you because it's a very historic day, knowing very well that we would have been marching in the streets, we would be demonstrating. However, today we are celebrating this on a webinar on the basis that the pandemic has been devastating our communities. So it is historic because
Donc, il disait que c'est un jour historique, la célébration de l'année mondiale des enseignants. Et cette année, c'est d'une manière inédite qu'elle est célébrée à cause de la pandémie Covid-19. 24 heures de marathon à travers le monde pour rendre hommage aux enseignants. Et pour cela, nous aurons à écouter les dirigeants, membres de nos organisations syndicales et les partenaires. Nous aurons également l'honneur d'être joints par de hauts fonctionnaires et des décideurs politiques, en particulier son Excellence Macky Sall, président de la République du Sénégal, l'honorable David Senghé, ministre de l'Éducation de base et de l'enseignement secondaire supérieur de Sierra Leone. Et bien sûr, notre frère et ancien président de l'IE, l'honorable Thembelani Toulas Nezi, ministre de l'Emploi et du Travail de l'Afrique du Sud. Une fois de plus, bienvenue à vous tous, membres des différentes organisations affiliées à l'IE en Afrique et dans d'autres régions, sans oublier nos partenaires. Le camarade Mugwena, qui avait commencé cette introduction, a quelques soucis, mais je vais vous présenter le programme en 3 temps. De 9h à 5h, nous aurons la voix de l'Afrique avec les enseignants, dirigeants syndicaux de l'éducation, notamment qui vont nous délivrer des messages, notamment leur réponse à la COVID-19. Ce qui sera bien sûr précédé par l'allocution de bienvenue de la vice-présidente de l'Internationale de l'éducation région Afrique et l'allocution d'ouverture du coordonnateur principal de l'EIRAF. Le deuxième temps, 9h50, 10h30, ça sera la présentation du rapport sur l'impact de la COVID-19 sur l'éducation en Afrique, suivi de discussions et des messages de nos partenaires. Oui, l'International de l'éducation, c'est aussi des partenariats pour l'éducation publique de qualité pour tous. 10h30, 11h30, ça sera la session de haut niveau sur l'avenir que nous voulons, avec de hauts fonctionnaires et décideurs politiques que nous écouterons avec beaucoup d'attention. Et pour terminer, nous aurons en beauté l'allocution du secrétaire général de l'IE, suivie de rythmes bien africains avec le groupe Kadassi et Massinga de l'Afrique du Sud. Vive les enseignants, leaders et façonneurs d'avenir. Bienvenue à tous et bel hommage aux enseignants du monde. Merci. Je passe la parole au camarade Mugwena.
Comrade Mariam, I think I'm having some internet problems, but thank you so much for the introduction of the program as we're beginning this important event. Now it is my time to call upon Mariam Chipkaou, our Vice Chairperson, Education International Africa Regional Committee from SNEN in Niger, to then address us today as we celebrate our day. I'm really apologizing. We had some internet problems, as you would know. This is Africa.
C'est avec un grand plaisir que je saisis cette occasion pour vous souhaiter à toutes et à tous la cordiale bienvenue à cette spéciale célébration en ligne de la Journée mondiale des enseignantes et des enseignants. La pandémie COVID-19 a fortement touché de nombreux secteurs, dont l'éducation. Des écoles ont été fermées et de nombreuses alternatives ont été essayées pour assurer la continuité de l'apprentissage, mais aucune d'entre elles ne s'est avérée efficace. Ces défis sans précédent ont placé les enseignantes et les enseignants et le personnel d'appui à l'éducation dans une situation très précaire, tout en mettant en exergue l'importance de l'enseignement public et plus encore le rôle inéluctable de l'enseignante et de l'enseignant. Nous apprécions donc la participation de toutes et de tous à la reconnaissance du rôle des enseignantes et enseignants, en particulier en ces temps difficiles de la pandémie COVID-19. En effet, le leadership des enseignantes et enseignants ne peut être sous-estimé. Il est d'une importance vitale que les enseignantes et enseignants contribuent à la création de moyens innovants pour faire face à l'augmentation de cas positifs de COVID-19 en Afrique et aussi pour prendre les devants pendant que les pays sortent de l'isolement et rouvrent les écoles ou pendant que l'apprentissage virtuel fait route avec la technologie en perpétuelle évolution ou encore pendant que les pays s'adaptent à la nouvelle normalité. La nouvelle normalité exigera certainement de repenser l'avenir. Il faudra pour cela investir davantage dans l'éducation et dans les enseignantes et les enseignants. Le gouvernement devrait prévoir un financement plus important de l'éducation car les nouvelles circonstances exigent davantage d'infrastructures pour répondre à l'exigence de la distanciation sociale, en plus des dispositifs qui assureront un assainissement adéquat pour éviter la propagation du virus corona. Il faudra davantage d'enseignantes et d'enseignants pour faire face à des ratios enseignants-enseignantes, élèves plus petits, et les enseignantes et enseignants actuels devront bénéficier d'un renforcement de capacité pour développer les compétences requises. Nous sommes très honorés que le président du Sénégal et les autres intervenants aient accepté notre invitation pour donner à cet événement tout son sens. Dans le même ordre d'idées, nous remercions la présidente et le secrétaire général de l'UE qui ont aimablement accepté de participer à la célébration africaine de la Journée mondiale des enseignantes et enseignants. Au nom des affiliés de l'UE en Afrique et du Comité régional africain de l'international de l'éducation, nous souhaitons la bienvenue à toutes et à tous ceux qui ont pu se connecter et suivre cette célébration de la Journée mondiale des enseignantes et enseignants, la première du genre en ligne. Le fait que nous soyons nombreux à nous rejoindre témoigne de l'importance que nous accordons à nos enseignantes et enseignants et à l'avenir de nos apprenants. Je vous remercie.
We want to thank you, Mariama, for the opening address of this event. As we celebrate today, to us as the teachers, the parents are giving gratitude. They have welcomed that there are certain things they cannot do without us. But to business and those mega education technologies and so forth, to them, it is let's make a killing out of the catastrophe. Thank you so much, Niger, for Mariama. Now we are going to be listening to the union leaders in the region. Mariam, can you come in and assist in terms of the leaders in the region? I'm not sure whether they're going to be followed by Dennis as our coordinator. And so forth. However, I want to deal with some issues in terms of how when we use the webinar. We call it ground rules, that when you would wish to ask a question, please use the chat box or where there's a question and answer so that you can put your question or your comment. Is very, very important that you do that throughout, and then you note at the time when we'll be having a discussion, then you can be able to do that. So thank you so much. Union leaders in the region, we have got 6 zones, and those zones, we shall listen to them now. But Mariam, if you could come in as well and assist in terms of whether it's Dennis or it's the union leaders. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, camarades co-modérateurs. Je voudrais d'abord passer la parole au camarade Denis Sinyolo, coordonnateur principal, pour son message d'ouverture. Dennis?
Merci beaucoup, Mariam. Colleagues and friends, we are all gathered online today to honor teachers and to celebrate our great profession. But as we all know, this year's celebration is unique in many ways. It is the biggest online commemoration of World Teachers' Day and is happening in extraordinary times. COVID-19 has ravaged health systems and impacted schools, tertiary education institutions, economies, and societies everywhere. African education systems have not been immune to the impact of the pandemic. In a few minutes' time, we'll be launching a report on the impact of COVID-19 on education in Africa, conducted for us by Professor Steve Nokiwocha. Without going into the details, the study's findings confirm what we've been saying all along, that technology cannot replace teachers. I repeat, technology cannot replace teachers, nor can distance education replace face-to-face in-school learning. While governments have taken measures to keep learning going during closures, none of these have been effective. Yes, distance education, online platforms, radio and television programs have been tried, but very few children, mostly from rich urban families, have been able to benefit from distance and virtual learning. The digital divide has resulted in greater exclusion, leaving girls and boys, children with disabilities, migrants and refugees, and rural children further behind. Colleagues, the same study reveals that there is lack of genuine consultation and dialogue between governments and unions concerning education during COVID-19. Furthermore, some governments are taking advantage of the current COVID-19 context to trample on democracy, human and trade union rights, including academic freedom and professional autonomy. Colleagues, unions are bulwarks of democracy, defenders and promoters of human rights and social justice. We should continue to say no to violations of fundamental freedoms, our rights and those of our students. Education is a fundamental human right and a public good, and governments have an obligation to guarantee this right. Colleagues, we need to put pressure on governments to uphold education and labor rights and to address widening. Research evidence shows that there is a real risk that many girls will be unable to return to school due to early marriages, pregnancy, child labor, or other factors. Despite the challenges posed by COVID-19, educators and their unions have taken the lead in the fight against the pandemic and its effects on education. They have been responsive, resilient, and proactive, taking initiatives and measures to keep teaching and learning going. Educators and their unions have been raising awareness, developing and sharing tools, and coming up with innovative solutions to keep their students learning. Colleagues and friends, as the World Teachers' Day theme states, as educators, we need to reimagine the future. Can you imagine a future where teachers are empowered and supported to reimagine or reshape the future of education? A future where they are genuinely consulted and their views taken into account when governments formulate education and teacher policies. Can you imagine a future where teachers are valued, trusted, and respected as professionals and paid a decent salary? A future where every child is taught by a trained, qualified, motivated, and supported teacher and learns in a safe, healthy, and well-resourced environment. Every African child deserves to be taught by a qualified teacher, deserves a good learning environment. Colleagues, we know that such a future is possible, but it will not come unless we fight for it. Colleagues and friends, we can only succeed if we build united and stronger education unions that are a force to reckon with, and the voice of the women and men in our classrooms at all education levels. Thanks to all the teachers, education support personnel, union leaders, partners, and policymakers who are part of this celebration today. Let's continue celebrating our day and our profession. Let's make every day World Teachers Day. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, camarade coordonnateur principal de l'EIRAF, pour cet important message sur l'impact de la COVID-19 sur le secteur de l'éducation, sur les conditions d'une éducation de qualité pour tous. Merci encore une fois. On l'avait annoncé tout à l'heure, c'est la voix de l'Afrique. L'EIRAF est divisée en zones. Nous avons 6 zones et nous allons entendre effectivement la voix de l'Afrique à travers les représentants de ces zones. Aussi, je vais appeler la camarade Hélène Nékarmbaye, membre de la zone 1 et membre du comité exécutif de l'International de l'éducation. Camarade Hélène, bienvenue.
Voilà, merci camarades. Bonjour et bonne fête à tout le monde. C'est une grande joie pour nous de commémorer cette fête malgré les difficultés que nous impose la pandémie pour ne pas nous réjouir de notre journée comme d'habitude. Et comme nous l'avons dit, pendant cette période de pandémie, les enseignants ont eu à subir beaucoup de situations et ils ont fait des sacrifices dans des pays pour pouvoir enseigner les enfants, où certains ont pu aller avec eux jusqu'à terminer l'année scolaire, malgré les difficultés que nous ont imposé cette situation. L'enseignement à distance qui était fait sans une réelle formation des enseignants. Les enseignants se sont mis sur le travail pour pouvoir enseigner l'enseignement à distance. Et la deuxième chose, c'est également les conditions sanitaires qui étaient très difficiles. Les dispositifs sanitaires n'étaient pas tellement requis, mais les enseignants ont également bravé cela pour enseigner les enfants dans des conditions difficiles. Les infrastructures que nous avons pour nos écoles, parce qu'il fallait une distanciation dans les salles de classe, mais il y a insuffisance des structures scolaires et universitaires qui n'ont pas pu nous permettre d'assurer réellement l'enseignement comme il se fallait pendant la pandémie. Également, nos gouvernants, pendant cette situation difficile, il y a eu beaucoup de mesures qui ont été prises et quelquefois, et beaucoup de fois même sans la concertation avec les syndicats des enseignants. Et les mesures sont tombées sur les enseignants, mais une fois de plus, les enseignants se sont armés de courage pour pouvoir enseigner les enfants. Et ce que nous pouvons dire en tant qu'enseignants cette journée, c'est de lancer un appel, c'est de faire des recommandations à nos gouvernants afin qu'ils puissent vraiment s'y mettre dans l'éducation. Nous avons le dialogue entre nos gouvernants et le syndicat des enseignants de par le monde est vraiment très nécessaire pour une compréhension commune des dispositifs à prendre pour l'éducation. Et nous savons également qu'en Afrique, l'éducation à distance est vraiment très difficile parce que nous n'avons pas les moyens de les appliquer. Il y a, nous l'avons dit tout le long de cette situation de la pandémie, qu'il y a des zones ou des villages où on n'a pas de radio, où on n'a pas de télévision, où on n'a pas de l'Internet. Le coût de l'Internet est très, très cher. Donc, ce qu'il faudrait faire en Afrique, c'est vraiment de privilégier l'enseignement présentiel. Et l'enseignement présentiel qui est bien pour tous les enfants. Alors que l'enseignement à distance pose des inégalités. Ces enfants qui n'ont pas pu suivre l'enseignement à distance pendant cette période de pandémie, c'est indépendamment de leur volonté et c'est dû à la pauvreté, c'est dû. Donc, il faut privilégier les conditions pour pouvoir mettre tous les enfants en salle et pouvoir les enseigner en présentiel. Et pour ce faire, nous pensons que nos gouvernements doivent augmenter les infrastructures scolaires. Ça, c'est vraiment au niveau scolaire comme universitaire. Il faut vraiment qu'il y ait des structures, des infrastructures. Et quand on dit infrastructure, ça veut dire qu'il faudrait qu'il y ait des salles de classe, des bâtiments qui soient construits. Il faut qu'il y ait des tablements. Il faut qu'il les accompagne avec des moyens. Et non seulement cela également, il faut que le dialogue soit instauré. Un réel dialogue, le dialogue franc et qui doit être perpétuel avec les syndicats des enseignants pour pouvoir étudier ensemble que faut-il faire pour la bonne éducation, pour la bonne marche des systèmes éducatifs en Afrique. Et pour cela, nous revenons pour dire que pour une éducation de qualité, nos gouvernements doivent instaurer, doivent investir dans l'éducation pour tous nos enfants. Merci et bonne fête à tout le monde. Merci. Allô?
Can I start? Good morning, everybody. Let me begin by bringing you greetings from Zone 2. I want to start by saying the entire world is in distress as a result of the COVID-19 threats. The reality of the situation is challenging to bear, and the education sector remains one of the worst hit by the pandemic. The coronavirus is a pandemic that has affected education systems worldwide, leading to widespread closure of schools. Notwithstanding, teachers have been very busy in trying to provide distant learning education amongst a host of other things. Today, we want to recognize the invaluable role of teachers in shaping our present and future, and takes this opportunity to commend, congratulate, and encourage teachers in their noble and often under-rewarded endeavor. On behalf of the millions of children and young people you have helped and continue to help, for the government for which you have produced leaders of integrity, for the children for whom you have produced responsible parents, and for ourselves whom you have given lasting memories of your commitment and patient guidance, we say a big thank you to you for your selfless acts of service to the continent. Teachers deserve more than just our gratitude. They deserve our full support. I therefore call on governments to prioritize education in its support mechanisms, especially during these trying times, COVID-19 pandemic. Government should not let teachers and children pay for the cost of the crisis. We must protect our education systems from current financial pressures and budgetary constraints. Let us recognize that investing in teachers is a wise investment in our efforts to build strong economies, cohesive societies, and a future of dignity and opportunity for all. On this World Teachers Day 2020, we want to reiterate our commitment to working progressively with all stakeholders to ensure that the aspirations of teachers become a reality. We aspire that every child must have a well-motivated, well-qualified, and highly professional trained teachers. We want to congratulate every teacher and wish each and every one of you a happy World Teachers Day celebrations. Please stay safe and solidarity forever.
Nous célébrons à l'instar du monde entier la Journée mondiale de l'enseignant, et ce, dans un contexte marqué par la COVID-19. Je voudrais, au nom de la zone 3 de l'International de l'éducation région Afrique que je représente, vous souhaiter une bonne fête. À cet effet, nous voudrions faire un plaidoyer auprès des gouvernements pour trouver l'équilibre entre la minimisation des risques pour la santé, la sécurisation des élèves et des éducateurs et la garantie d'un enseignement et d'un apprentissage de qualité pour tous dans le strict respect des mesures barrières en vigueur. Chers camarades, un enseignant ou un élève contaminé constitue un vecteur de la propagation de la maladie à coronavirus. C'est pourquoi je vous invite, chers collègues, à observer les mesures barrières et vous exhorte à sensibiliser les parents au respect des droits de l'enfant en assurant leur protection contre cette pandémie, contre la traite, l'exploitation et le travail des enfants. Selon le BIT, une première évaluation de l'impact de la COVID-19 sur le monde du travail mondial révèle que les effets seront de grande envergure avec son corollaire des millions de travailleurs au chômage et ou sous-emploi, d'où l'augmentation de la pauvreté. Nous voudrions rappeler que les nouvelles vagues de contamination observées dans certains pays prouvent à souhait que la maladie n'est pas encore terminée et commandent donc que nous restions éveillés et vigilants. Je voudrais saisir cette tribune pour inviter les gouvernements du monde entier à prendre des mesures urgentes et coordonnées en vue de protéger les enseignants, le personnel éducatif et les élèves sur leur lieu de travail. Enfin, en terminant, je voudrais lancer un appel à tous les gouvernants dans le sens de l'amélioration des conditions de vie et de travail décents au profit des enseignants. Je vous remercie.
Je suis Fridolin Mve Messa, secrétaire général du syndicat de l'éducation nationale, Sénat du Gabon. Je suis par ailleurs représentant de la zone 4 au bureau régional. Il faut dire que la zone 4 compte 7 pays, le Rwanda, le Burundi, la RCA, le Congo, la RDC, le Gabon et le Cameroun. Dans ces pays-là, la COVID-19 a eu un impact très remarqué du fait de la fermeture de tous les établissements scolaires et le renvoi des enfants à la maison. Les enseignants de ces zones-là se sont vus mis en congé forcé, je peux dire technique, et ont perdu pour la plupart leur emploi. Certains qui travaillaient dans les écoles privées n'ont plus été payés jusqu'à ce jour. Et nous avons enregistré des cas de maladie, des cas de stress, et les décès, nous avons enregistré dans nos pays beaucoup de décès d'enseignants dus à la Covid et à la précarité, parce que le stress ayant gagné nos collègues. Bon, les syndicats ne sont pas restés sans rien faire. Nous avons voulu, à travers différentes actions, nous avons voulu rester très proches de nos collègues à partir de nos différentes plateformes, WhatsApp et autres que nous avons créées. Nous avons maintenu le lien avec nos collègues de l'intérieur. Nous avons également mené des campagnes de sensibilisation à l'endroit des enseignants et des élèves dans l'établissement qui ont ouvert partiellement pour permettre aux enseignants, aux élèves de passer les examens. Nous avons également soutenu les enseignants à travers les cours à distance que nos pays ont adoptés. Nous avons également mené des plaidoyers envers le gouvernement afin que des mesures soient prises pour garantir l'emploi de nos collègues, l'emploi des enseignants, également permettre à ce que leurs revenus ne soient pas hypothéqués et de permettre à ce que les promoteurs d'établissements privés continuent à payer nos collègues qui travaillaient dans ce secteur-là. Donc la Covid a été très négatif dans nos pays, du fait que les programmes n'ont pas pu être achevés et nos élèves n'ont pas pu, pour la plupart, passer les examens parce qu'il a fallu faire des choix. Le plaidoyer que nous faisons envers le gouvernement, c'est qu'ils investissent dans l'école publique, qu'ils construisent suffisamment de structures afin de permettre à ce que tous les élèves puissent regagner leurs écoles, leurs établissements en toute sécurité, je voulais dire, dans le respect strict des mesures barrières édictées par l'OMS, à savoir le lavage des mains, le port des masques et la distanciation physique. Donc, et nous avons espoir que les éducateurs et les enseignants vont sortir tête haute de cette pandémie parce que nous ne devons pas être des victimes ni de la Covid, ni de nos États qui doivent opérer les choix. Donc nous pensons que la lutte continue et nous continuerons toujours à faire en sorte à mettre de la pression pour que nos États puissent prendre leurs responsabilités et permettre à ce que l'école ne puisse pas s'arrêter.
The impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been devastating, not only because students missed their education, but also lost educators, families, and relatives due to the fatalities. The psychosocial impact due to school closures is immeasurable. Early marriage and gender-based violence have been reported very high. This situation is true both in Ethiopia and in the zone. To mitigate fatalities of the virus, unions in the zone have obviously been doing their level best, though collecting reports have not been easy. For example, in Ethiopia, we distributed circulars to the branch offices alerting that members should take appropriate measures to prevent themselves and the community they live in from the virus. Consequently, members have been participating in house-to-house community mobilization to practice social distancing, wearing masks, and washing hands. In sensitizing members about the virus, we made use of radio, TV, talk shows, and on social media. COVID-19 had put pressure on teachers since they are supposed to prepare online teaching lessons, and in some cases, they had to submit hard copies of the teaching materials, especially in private schools, which may create physical contact and which in turn may result in contracting the virus. Moreover, teachers are expected to cover the portions not covered when schools open, requiring them to do extra works. In attempting to open schools, governments are expected to construct more classrooms so as to minimize the number of students per class. They are required to sufficiently provide personal protective equipment such as masks and sanitizers, as well as water and soap. In so doing, governments should closely work with teacher organizations in their respective countries to mobilize the necessary resources. Developed countries should also cooperate in this regard.
Happy World Teachers Day to all the teachers, all the educators and personnel in education in the world. This is a great day for us frontline workers as well as agents of change. Southern Africa was not spared in the wake of COVID-19, as the majority of the schools remained closed since March, under the lockdown environment, under the curfews which were imposed by different governments in order to curtail the spread of COVID-19. We would like to commend the efforts put in place by our governments in making sure that learners and teachers were safely in their homes. However, this has resulted in lack of access to education for the millions of children who remained at home at a time when they were supposed to be in school. Indeed, there was an important intervention of remote learning where children learned, as well as the parents experienced how it is like to learn from home. but it is only a small, minute percentage of schools that were able to keep in touch with learners and parents in order to do this. In Zimbabwe, where I come from, this came quite late in the form of radio lessons and Google classes, particularly those who are in privileged schools, private schools. And great lessons have been learned. That governments have to fund education adequately in the 21st century to make sure that every parent, every learner, every educator has access and capacity to use remote tools. It is important going forward that we make sure that all the rights are protected, particularly the labor rights for teachers, which were violated in the wake of COVID-19. The majority of those of education personnel who work in private schools, even those who work in public schools, could not access salaries regularly because schools could not collect money from fees when the schools were closed. It is important for all our governments to learn that governments have to create an environment in the schools which quickly adjusts in the wake of calamities, disasters, as well as pandemics. It is important going forward that education is capacitated and adequately funded to ensure that programs and models of blended learning, where there is a mixture of face-to-face learning as well as virtual remote learning, are well funded, and every learner, regardless of where they come from, rural areas, remote areas, can afford. And that government should forge partnerships with service providers who provide networks as well as data to make sure that these networks are available and that the data is affordable to the extent that it is free for our learners. Happy World Teachers' Day. Great work that the teachers are doing across the world and in Africa in Zone 6. Many thanks to Education International for facilitating that we have this virtual conversation and commemoration. Solidarity forever.
Let me take this opportunity as we celebrate this historic day of the World Teachers' Day, now to take you to the next segment of our program. This is following into the footsteps of the Asia Pacific that have had a very excellent session early hours of this morning, and where we listen to Maria Rosa, we listen to Kailash, and so many. So now I'm going to take this opportunity in Africa to introduce you to someone who will then be having a conversation with Professor Steve, who has conducted the survey on the impact of COVID-19 on education in Africa, and we will listen to them. So the person I'm introducing is a senior TV and radio presenter. She hails from South Africa, and then she will then be having this conversation that will be very exciting conversation to hear what the teachers and the leaders of the schools are saying about the impact of COVID-19. We have just listened to the 6 regional or zonal leaders in Africa, all of them emphasizing the importance of teachers in terms of the work that they do, but how the teachers have responded to the pandemic, and how the government was not ready and the teachers were there. So no learner was left behind. And therefore, allow me to present to you Mbali Tetani, who will then take over and then deal with the issue of this particular survey. We have provided the summary of the survey, and they will take you through. Thank you. Mbali, welcome to Education International, the family of teachers from early childhood to higher education. As we celebrate, we are very grateful that you have been able to join us as an anchor and as a host now. Can you take over? Thank you.
Grateful for this opportunity. Now, we are commemorating World Teachers Day today. And of course, as we do so at a very different time in our lives. We know that we are battling the coronavirus, and we have to now learn ways to live alongside this virus. Now, before I get straight into it, Mr. Maluleke has, of course, introduced me. I am a journalist in South Africa. I'm a TV reporter for 24-hour news channel, and we will be in conversation then with Professor Steve, who has conducted the survey during a very precarious time in our lives as we are in the midst of this pandemic. Now, we also will be taking questions, so you will be listening very closely on into what went into the survey that Professor Steve will be sharing with us. Now, we know that this COVID-19 has affected a number of countries. It has affected the world over when it comes to issues around how we live. And it has affected issues around the economy. It has affected issues around jobs. There's been major job losses because of COVID-19. And another sector that has also been affected is, of course, the education sector. And this is where now we'll be bringing in Professor Steve. He has conducted the survey in which he will be telling us in terms of, how teaching and learning was conducted, especially during the lockdown regulations, where we found a number of countries and the world over introducing these lockdown regulations, which meant that teaching and learning could not take place in the traditional way. Professor Steve, thank you so much for joining us now. You have conducted the survey. Your survey is titled COVID-19 and Education, How Education Unions in Africa Are Responding to the Pandemic. If you can just share with us what went into conducting your survey.
Thank you, Ambali. The survey was actually a follow-up of what had earlier been done by Education International at the global level, because in March, at the outbreak of the pandemic, at the global level, Education International had carried out a survey to know how the unions are responding and the situation of the education system, students, teachers, and education support personnel. So the study that was initiated by Education International Africa region, which we conducted in August and September, was actually a follow-up and to deepen that earlier study to know what the situation had been within the Africa region. The survey covered 54 unions across 34 countries, and we relied basically on structured online questionnaires, and also complemented the study with interview of 13 union leaders from 13 countries across Africa. Virtually all regions of Africa were covered in the study. And so we look closely at the situation of schools at the outbreak of the COVID, whether they are closed or open. We looked at the processes of resumption. We looked at initiatives by government to sustain learning during the pandemic. We looked at also what unions were doing in order to minimize the impact on teaching and learning and on their members. We looked at the impact of the pandemic on the condition of teachers, their terms of service and salaries, and a number of issues that were covered. And interestingly, we found out a number of issues that align with the fears that the general public had. For instance, schools were shut in all 34 countries. Only about 8% said schools were open or fully open. And where they were open, in most cases, they were for special category of students. And so learning actually stopped. And the pandemic is unprecedented I think there's nothing like it since the end of the World War. And the world didn't see it coming. The impact is profound, and the impact will still be studied for a long time to come. Now, when learning came to a halt, state government, national government took some steps to ensure continuity. About 80% of those surveyed said that governments initiated teaching and learning through radio and television programs. Again, we know this is not an effective means of teaching and learning because it's one way, and sometimes they are pre-recorded. So there is no feedback mechanism, no assessment. And again, it's assessed only by a few learners who live in urban areas and who had electricity, who had radio and television. We had about 50-something% that said there was online learning, mostly for tertiary institutions. Again, such teaching and learning could have been accessed by only the rich who could afford computer, electricity, internet. So we could say that learning significantly was halted and there wasn't quite much achieved. The teachers and education support personnel on their own part were rudely shocked because they were not prepared for what came their way. UNESCO Institute for Statistics has statistics that show that majority of teachers in Africa, even where they are qualified, had not been adequately trained to use educational technologies. And so teachers did not have the computers, internet, electricity, infrastructure, and the psychological orientation to go online. So it was a period of frustration for them as there was that big gulf between them and their students. Again, there were cases of infections. We had 4,000 and above infections of teachers in South Africa, though in many other countries, there was that view that the health data of those infected were not released. So they couldn't know the exact number, but most countries feared that teachers and students were also having infections. And in fact, in terms of reopened schools, the Minister of Education for State in Nigeria gave the figure of 15% as emanating from schools that reopened, 15% of entire COVID infections in certain countries as coming from the school environment. So there was that issue of infection. The condition of service of teachers were also devastated, largely for those in private schools. They were either laid off, their salaries delayed, or not paid at all. And in places like Rwanda, government provided loans so that proprietors could continue to pay these teachers. During my interview, we found out that even the proprietors did not, in their good number, access those loans. Possibly they were not sure of being able to pay back. So those that suffered most were teachers in private schools. And in the public sector, though they received their salaries in the majority, but those in temporary employment in the public sector were also affected. Either their contracts were terminated or they were not immediately paid. Overall, the impact of the COVID is a fear that inequalities will, get bigger. Education inequalities between the rich and the poor, between the marginalized and those who have access, because you now see people living in the rural area, you see the girl child, you see those with disabilities, you see those from poor homes. So at the end of this COVID, it could be possible that the educational inequality we try to close up in Africa had actually widened. And this is a cause for concern because the global measure of educational attainment over the century, over the decades, from education for all to Millennium Development Goal and now education 2030 has always placed the Africa region, especially sub-Saharan Africa, at the bottom of achievements. And so this calls for concern that government and Education International have to address issues of educational inequality at the end of COVID. And we are not sure that all those that left school could come back because we've been battling with out-of-school children. In Nigeria, we have close to 12 million out-of-school children. That's the country with the highest number of out-of-school children in the continent. And based on the population of 200 anyway, 200 million people, and we know there are also other countries with that higher rate, but this is likely to increase. And so there is need for programs to be initiated to ensure that after COVID, students that left schools might come back. And let me also mention one very important negative impact that has to do with school feeding, because many students are so poor that the only meals they used to take are the school feeding, the meals provided by the schools. With the closure of schools, these students went back to their slums or rural areas, and they could not access the feeding again. So hunger, malnutrition, disease, and apart from lack of access to education, could have been the lot of the preponderance of students, knowing that majority of the dwellers in Africa are in the rural areas and are actually lacking. So the overall impact of the COVID has been quite devastating.
Thank you, Professor. You've named a number of issues in which education has been affected, especially during the pandemic. Now, I just want us to zoom into the issue specifically, because you've mentioned the issues around how teachers had not prepared for this, how governments had not planned for this, and how when it came to teaching and learning, it had to be done differently. And everybody was going into this very blindly. When you zoom into the impact on education, if you could just take us through that and just let us know how, in general, has education been affected by the pandemic?
Yeah, as I stated earlier, the pandemic led to closure of schools. The study showed that only 8% of unions surveyed said schools were fully open. And 15% said actually those schools that were open were tertiary institutions, possibly private schools, because many public, even tertiary institutions, had issues with providing all the protocols required, so they could not open. In terms of reopening of schools, which started with around August and September, we discovered that countries began to phase their reopening of schools, starting with what is now known as exit classes or examination classes, those that have to write their school or ordinary level school certificate. And eventually, by this time, many more schools are opening. So the schools are not even totally open as we speak across the country. As I did say, in specific figures, 87% of those surveyed said their countries used radio and television to reach students. And we have explained the deficiency in using radio and television, particularly science and mathematics teachers. We are concerned that you could not teach mathematics and science, which were practical courses, through television, and radio, which are, one-way communication. Now 32% of those surveyed said students were reached through take-home workbooks and packages, which enabled them to be working, alone at home. And 55% said online means were used, and which we said these are for the privileged few and tertiary institutions. And of course, you have 21% that said no action was even taken in their own case. So that closure of school was very effective. We also know that we asked the unions to say how effective overall teaching and learning had been during the closure. 83% said learning was ineffective. So it was as good as saying no learning actually took place, because there was no supervision, no serious interaction, no assessment, and you couldn't be sure it covered the syllabus. And we also asked the union their feelings about introduction of educational technology or going online. Do they have any fears that it could affect the future of their career? 60% said yes, they are afraid there will be job losses if the online is implemented. But 34% agreed with the statement that yes, educational technology will make their job easier. And then 36% said there's need to shift online. 26% said there's no effect. So overall, majority of those surveyed are afraid that even the advocacy for online education may affect their jobs. And now, in terms of government support, 62% of those surveyed said government rendered no support whatsoever. So the union and the educators were left, to be on their own and so forth. Yeah.
And Professor Steve, you've mentioned issues around how, when it comes to support, that teachers found themselves vulnerable. Also, when you're looking at, in terms of training, that not much training was done to prepare teachers for online classes. I want us to move now to another question that I have for you. I just want to find out from you, specifically looking at the pandemic, and specifically looking at teachers and education support personnel across the region. How did you find that in your study?
The impact on the education support personnel and teachers, like I said earlier, the teachers that were in private schools, majority of them had their jobs stopped, had no salaries paid, or were laid off. And we had cases where they could have the proprietors could have borrowed to pay from government, but they did not access. And actually, majority of the teachers in public sector had no issue because government was able to sustain their salary. That we proved. But the number of those that were in temporary employment and contracts that were affected was significant because they couldn't keep their contract or keep their pay. So the impact on salaries and condition of service was, quite significant in this respect.
And looking at teacher unions and looking at educators across the region, how did they respond to the pandemic? Because we know that teaching and learning could not be done in the traditional way. So when you look at how the teacher unions responded, as well as the educators across the region, how did they respond to the virus, and was it effective?
The unions actually, I think, did what they could do at best within the context. 92% of them indicated that they created awareness and sensitization of their members about COVID and how to stay safe and to address issues about teaching and learning. So 92%, which is like virtually every union, was intensively engaged in addressing sensitization and awareness issues about members. Another 72% said they engage in social policy dialogue with government. That means they try to engage the government. I do believe maybe your next question will come about consultation and how the extent the government was able to listen to the unions. So, but for now, 72% said they engage in social policy dialogue with government. 38% said they developed tools and instruments that could help their members to cope and that could also help, especially with reopening of schools, to know exactly what to do. There were other actions taken by the unions. For instance, in South Africa, they were able to win what they called free data concession. The government and the public teamed up with the unions to ensure that the communication companies gave them free access to educational portals, so that for students and teachers to visit educational portals, it has to be free without charging them for internet, because we know that bandwidth cost is very high. In Gabon, they have free electricity and water, and so they made efforts. In Kenya, the university's academic staff took the government to court when they wanted to cut their salaries, and they won. In Zimbabwe, they also took court action. So unions, uneven reactions, but there were countries that were on top of their game. Again, back to South Africa, they were able to sign what they called comorbidity agreement, which enabled teachers above 60 years or those with underlying ill health, because the WHO had already said that people with underlying ill health are prone to COVID infection. So they signed an agreement that this category of teachers could teach from home with special arrangements. So a number of these measures had gone on, across the country in different fashions.
And looking at the societal problems and looking at social impact of COVID-19, when you look at school closures and distance learning, during the pandemic, what has the social impact of school closures and long distance learning been like in the midst of COVID-19?
The social impact is great because if you look at it from societal point of view and sociologically speaking, there is increased inequality. There is increased educational inequality. And if education is at the bottom or foundation of development, that means there is widened gap now in terms of development between the powerful and the powerless, between the haves and the have-not. That's a fundamental thing that we have to grasp with, knowing that education defines development. So with this inequality that has occurred, because some had access to online education, continued their learning without problem, whereas majority did not have, then obviously there was that social inequality. I've mentioned the issue of hunger and malnutrition, which is key and social in Africa. That school feeding program, which has become even a UN agenda, and in most countries, an agenda as well, developmental agenda, was also disrupted. And so we could have seen many children go without feeding and hunger and malnutrition, and that would predispose them to disease and so forth. So the impact is really serious. And then we look at the girl child and gender and violence, gender-based violence has increased this time from South Africa to Nigeria to Ethiopia. Check the social media, the rage of social violence, gender-based, during this closure is unprecedented. And social media has helped a lot to expose most of this social violence, and security agencies are going after them. So these are all impacts of COVID, because the school traditionally has the function of playing the role of a custody. When the schools are in session and working properly, they take custody of these children. The gender issue is addressed, custody of little children and all that, and they wouldn't be exposed to such violence. I discussed with some people during the interview, and they said rape has increased in their countries, and many children are wondering. And where the economy has been open and the schools closed, then the children are even left without the care of their parents equally. They have left the care of the schools. They also leave the care of their parents, because their parents, when the economy was reopened, also had to go to work in order to fend for them, because you know that the shutdown in the economy was affecting the economies of the families. So from different angles, violence, inequality, gender issues, feeding, hunger and poverty, and I keep mentioning that Africa, sub-regional, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, hasn't earned the mark it's supposed to have when global educational performances are assessed. So these are all helping to really whittle down the great strides that had been made before the pandemic.
Now, Professor, we also find ourselves in a situation where many countries are beginning to ease down the lockdown regulations, and we are beginning to see teaching and learning and pupils and students going back into the classroom. Now, when you look at the findings of your survey, would you say that have governments in the region put in place adequate measures to ensure that teaching and learning now, even though we still find ourselves in the midst of the coronavirus, happens in a safe environment?
Yes, we asked the leaders to tell us, assess on a scale of 1 to 5, point by point, what is the score for face mask, the provision of face masks in their schools, provision of water and sanitation for washing of hands, provision of personal protective equipment for teachers and students, and then the possibility of social distancing within the classroom and outside the classroom, and the provision of every school with the health guidelines and overall ability to meet the WHO guidelines. We ask the leaders to assess their countries on these issues. On the average, 3 is what we got. On the average, majority, the average is 3. That means on a scale of 1 to 5, most countries have performed just moderately, which means that there's still room for improvement. And surprisingly, there are those that score their country 1, which stood very inadequate. And some score their countries 2, which meant inadequate. So the majority lie between being moderate and sliding towards inadequate. And so it is important as schools resume that countries should put in place these protocols, because as I mentioned earlier, even the Minister of State for Education in Nigeria has given a figure that we're still looking at, that 15% of total infections are coming from school environments. And that has been the reason. If you also look at the survey we did, we asked the leaders if they prefer schools to resume now, no matter the situation, or they would prefer schools to resume in future when COVID is under control. 53%, 53 said they preferred schools to resume now. And the lesser number, slightly lesser number said in future. So among the unions themselves, it is 50-50. Half want schools closed still, and half felt they could resume, provided these protocols are made. So resumption of schools must be done with cautious optimism. So
right. Just the last question from me.
Yeah, thank you.
Just the last question from me. We don't have much time. I just want to find out if you can just take us through quickly through the recommendations you have made in your survey, specifically to government and to teacher unions, should we find ourselves in another crisis of this nature?
Yes, quickly, for Education International, the research has revealed a lot, and it already has resources. So they should pool the resources revealed by the research and existing resources and use this time to share best practices among the unions in order to strengthen them. Number 2, Education International should collaborate with government and other international organizations to use this time to review existing guidelines for education in emergencies, because the guidelines exist, but COVID has shown that there could be such impact that will take everyone unaware. So the time to review existing emergency guidelines is now. I should also mention that African Union, which is the continent we are looking at, has come out with its own framework for dealing with COVID, which is called DOTSS. The full detail is in the report. Now, the findings have almost 100% complemented every aspect of the DOT framework of the African Union. So we are calling for synergy between Education International and African Union so that they could increase the momentum and impact. And for governments generally, we discovered that 62% or more didn't get support from government during this time. And even about more than 62% said government did not consult them or did not use their views. So we have 2 recommendations for governments. They need to consult these unions at this time, because teachers have a right to be consulted in matters of education. It's a right. And then in terms of support, teachers need socio-psychological support, professional development, and professional preparation in terms of shifting to online. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Of course, that is Professor Steve there. He conducted the survey called COVID-19 and Education, how education unions in Africa are responding to the pandemic. Unfortunately, we don't have much time to respond to your questions, but I'm sure if you do write those questions on the social media pages, I'm sure Professor Steve will be able to answer those very crucial questions. Thank you very much. It's back to you, Mr. Maluleke.
Il m'a été demandé plusieurs fois ce que je pense d'un enseignant. Et pendant longtemps, mon mutisme face à cette question a été considéré comme une ingratitude envers cet être entièrement à part qui au quotidien bâtit le monde. Aujourd'hui, je voudrais sans langue de bois rompre avec ce silence ou avoir le cœur dégagé. Voici ce que je pense d'un enseignant. Un enseignant est une personne qui n'a pas le même destin que les autres, car c'est celui qui aujourd'hui façonne la vie de ceux qui demain décideront de son sort. Oh, quel triste sort! Oh, quel destin! Un enseignant est une personne qui accepte se sacrifier pour les autres. Un enseignant est une personne qui volontiers accepte parfaire l'œuvre de Dieu sur terre, car Dieu lui crée l'être. Mais l'enseignant, quant à lui, participe à son bien-être. Un enseignant est une personne qui, au nom de la passion et de la vocation, affronte au quotidien les caprices d'un adolescent innocent qui se soucie peu de son devenir et de son bien-être. Un enseignant est une personne qui n'a pas tous les droits, mais plusieurs devoirs. Celui par exemple de faire de la créature de Dieu un être utile à l'humanité. Celui par exemple de faire de la réussite de ses apprenants une priorité. Celui par exemple de bien s'habiller même s'il n'est pas bien payé. Un enseignant, c'est tout simplement une personne qui sait qu'il est surveillé comme du lait sur le feu. C'est une personne qui malheureusement n'a pas comme les autres le droit de commettre une faute mineure. C'est une personne qui, comme un chirurgien, n'a pas droit à l'erreur. Sinon, bonjour la catastrophe. Un enseignant n'est pas un être à clochardiser, encore moins un être à ridiculiser. Un enseignant n'est pas un être à déshonorer, mais plutôt un être à vénérer. Et ça, tout le monde le sait. Oui, ça, tout le monde le sait. Même ceux qui n'auraient jamais dû réussir sans les taisez-vous d'un enseignant. Même ceux qui n'auraient jamais dû devenir personnalité sans les prenez une feuille d'un enseignant. Même ceux qui, depuis le ventre de leur mère, étaient condamnés à ne jamais pouvoir arriver à déchiffrer l'alphabet, mais qui quand même y sont parvenus grâce au génie d'un enseignant. Oui, un enseignant n'est pas un être à persécuter, mais plutôt un être à enchanter. C'est pourquoi, cher enseignant, je voudrais non seulement te dire merci pour tout, mais aussi et surtout te dérouler le tapis rouge, car n'est pas enseignant qui veut, mais est enseignant qui peut. Merci pour avoir fait de moi ce que je suis. Merci pour toutes ces nuits blanches passées à cause de mon avenir. Franchement, merci pour tout. Mais quant à ceux qui aujourd'hui préfèrent pour des raisons incongrues te remercier en monnaie de singe, je voudrais te demander de les pardonner car ils ne savent pas ce qu'ils font. Pardonne-les malgré tout, car ils ignorent certainement que nul n'a le droit de s'amuser avec les testicules de son père. Et comme il est écrit dans le livre de la vie, ne les maudis pas, mais bénis-les. Bénis-les car tôt ou tard, ils comprendront que ridiculiser un enseignant est un sacrilège. Je suis Majid Bagba, le griot des temps modernes. Bien à vous et à la prochaine.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à Mbali et à Steve. Dommage qu'on n'ait pu pas avoir de questions-réponses, mais nous allons nous approprier cette importante étude. Merci également pour ce beau poème pour rendre hommage aux enseignants. Chers collègues, l'IE a fait un travail remarquable pour l'adoption des objectifs de développement durable, notamment l'ODD 4. Elle a beaucoup travaillé et continue de travailler avec des partenaires pour la mise en œuvre de ces ODD, pour un service public de qualité, pour des conditions décentes de travail, pour une éducation publique de qualité pour tous. Nous allons donner la parole successivement à certains de ces partenaires. Il y a l'International des services par son secrétaire général Sani Baba, la CSI Afrique, par son secrétaire général Kwasi Adam Amankwa, à l'ANSE au camarade Boaz Vaoukou et à l'UNESCO IGBA par son directeur Yumeku Yoko Zeki. Nous allons les entendre successivement. Merci à ces partenaires d'avoir bien voulu adresser un message aux enseignants. Nous allons passer la parole à l'International des services publics.
Good morning, my fellow comrades. On behalf of Public Service International, African Arab countries, I bring you warm greetings on this great day as you celebrate the World Teachers' Day. My name is Sani Baba Mohammed, who serves as the Regional Secretary based in Lomé, Togo. This year's celebration is taking place at a very crucial moment in our lives, as you all know, due to another pandemic ravaging the entire world. Another pandemic, I call it because this is not the first time we are passing through this type of problem, though not as serious as this. As you are all aware, we had Ebola in the recent past in Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea-Conakry. And right now, at the moment, we are still battling with Ebola crisis alongside with the COVID-19 in the Republic of DRC. The choice for this year's theme, Teachers Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future, is very apt and at the right time, so that collectively we can also sit and decide how to shape our future. Pandemics, conflicts, wars have always been with us. You all know the insurgency we're passing through in Nigeria, Chad, Cameroon, Burkina Faso, and also Niger Republic. And the displacement of teachers and public servants in the Arab world, which has so far made many of them migrants and into migration. And many of teachers and civil servants in Nigeria, Niger, Chad have also been displaced, thereby making them also internally displaced persons who also need help and support from all of us. Like I mentioned, comrade, this is supposed to be a short message to all teachers and all public sector workers in Africa and Arab countries. But let me quickly say that we all have to come together to support each other, especially in our campaigns on tax justice, water justice, and climate justice, because already many of us have become targets and victims. And collectively, we need to build alliances with civil society organizations and other like minds so that we can together move the system forward and enjoy an environment where we can provide our services unhindered. We need to rise up to the challenge and call for compensation for those teachers that died or killed in the course of insurgency in many parts of Africa. This we have to do if we are completely convinced that yes, teachers deserve their reward right here. There have been attempts by many countries to call for teacher salary structure, which has not been listened to. I think this is the right time for us, taking into cognizance how the pandemic ravaged many of us and the economies of our countries, to stand together and call for what is supposed to be paid to all teachers, place our demands right before our governments and employers so that they do what they are supposed to do in support of our teaming teachers who are on daily basis trying hard to make sure they give a direction, a very positive direction to the society by educating our children to become right leaders in our various governments and our various countries. So with these few mass comrades, I want to salute your courage for taking the pains, despite the COVID-19, to celebrate this year's World Teachers' Day. I wish you all the best and happy celebration. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Dear colleagues, on the occasion of World Teachers' Day, ITUC Africa salutes Education International Africa Region and all teachers and education workers across Africa. The theme that we have chosen for this year's celebration, Teachers Leading in a Crisis and Reimagining the Future, is particularly relevant because of the challenging times we face. We know that COVID-19 has caused a scale of disruption which is unprecedented in modern times. Economies and social life have been affected, livelihoods have been affected across the entire globe. EI itself has reported that 63 million teachers have been affected, whilst over 1 billion students have had their education disrupted. Your theme suggests that teachers fully recognize the challenge that we face at this moment, which is one of leadership. As our countries try to address the major issue of reconstruction and recovery, unions need to find their place properly at the table. And within the education sector, teachers have to input to make sure that the appropriate protocols are respected so that schools can be safe for teachers, for students, and for all other stakeholders. In the larger society, unions must fully rise up to make sure that our interests are taken into account in the measures that are being developed. So I want to ask you, our teachers, to offer the requisite leadership to our union movement and to help unite our unions to make sure that we can get our voices heard properly and in a way that it can be fully taken into account as our countries strive towards recovery. We wish you all the best as we celebrate World Teachers' Day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is Boaz Waruku, the Program Manager on SEFA in Africa. I'm happy to join you during this occasion when we are celebrating the International Teachers' Day. This is a special occasion when ideally we need to be thanking teachers for enabling the world to move around. Because without a teacher, even you who are beaming this won't be able to do it. This is a difficult moment also because it's coming during the COVID-19 pandemic at a time when teachers in the private schools have lost jobs, but teachers also in the public sector, many are at home as we speak, unsure of what to do next, not really motivated because you see a teacher's motivation is to be with the learners, with the pupils, with the students. But in this case, they actually do not know what to do. They also are worried about their safety when schools reopen. So I just want to encourage all these teachers. It's been difficult, but you are the people who make us overcome some of these challenges. I would like to appeal to you to pick up the pieces and restore the world to where it was, but even beyond, because we actually require a new beginning to ensure that all the learners are back in school and learning, that you, the teachers, get motivated despite all these challenges to enable us move forward as one. Otherwise, I wish you the very best during this special occasion.
Happy World Teachers' Day 2020. We are celebrating the day with the theme, Teachers Leading in Crisis, Reimagining the Future. My name is Yumiko Yokozaki. I work for UNESCO ICBA, International Institute for Capacity Building in Africa, UNESCO's Institute for Teacher Development in the continent, based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. This year, we have witnessed a COVID-19 pandemic affecting many elements of our lives: society, politics, economy, and education. In many countries of the African continent, schools were closed rather abruptly in March and April this year. Teachers were thrown into emergency, being asked to continue teaching students who could not come to school. Teachers tried their best. Printed materials were provided, online courses were made, and the social media such as Facebook, Messenger, WhatsApp, and even telephone and text messages were used to provide continuous learning and reaching out to students. Governments also enhanced existing TV and radio education. However, the reality was harsh. Many teachers were frustrated as they did not have experience. They did not have knowledge and skills for such activities, and they did not have a means and tools. Our research on teachers' experience and perception on COVID-19 school closure shows that the majority of teachers felt they need more knowledge and skills on distance learning. Fewer than half of the teachers were given such support, and more support Most of these support were given by school leadership. Yes, head teachers made a difference. We must not forget, teachers are willing and motivated to provide a distance learning for their pupils and students, but they need knowledge, skills, and support as well as encouragement. We also hear that some countries and schools paid a reduced salary for teachers during the school closure. How disappointing this is. Teachers should be rewarded for their extra efforts. ICBA has been running a weekly webinar for teachers, teacher educators, and policymakers in Africa since the beginning of April this year, where people were sharing ideas and experience. We are now running webinars for school reopening to support teachers. Teachers must be respected and appreciated. They should have adequate support in such an emergency, and there should be an internet connectivity for teachers and students free of charge or at reduced cost, even after the school reopening. We must use this crisis as an opportunity to rethink of teachers' professional development, their socio-economic status, and their professional motivation. Teaching profession must be respected and appreciated. We should have the brightest young people aspiring to be teachers in the continent. I hope we will overcome the COVID-19's negative impact and reopen schools safely. Teachers' roles are immense, and our future is in the hands of teachers. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Our future is in the hands of our teachers. Recognize the teachers. Pay them well. Appreciate them. These are the messages we receive from our partners. Thank you so much for our partners to be with us. We are now moving to the next segment of our program today. This segment is about the future we want, because our theme it's clear that we need to reimagine the education and reimagine the future. Now, in any crisis or any pandemic, there are things that help us to build resilience. Our teachers have taught us that poetry is part of us understanding the world, but also it provokes our emotions so that we're able to build resilience. Our teachers have taught us that music is part of us, it's part of our soul. In a crisis like this, if we listen to music and poetry, we can indeed build resilience. So we can self-reflect, and poetry and music is beautiful. Let me introduce to you our traditional Maskanti band from South Africa in a video called Kadashi and Makinga. They come from Mpangeni in the heart of Zululand. Listen to them. They can help us to build resilience. Thank you.
Sanibonani nonke, igama lami ngu David Qatasi Jenkins.
Sanibonani nonke, igama lami ngu Maqhinga kwaHadebe eMpangeni.
Hi everyone, we are Qatasi and Maqhinga from Durban in South Africa, and we play traditional Maskandi music, which is unique to South Africa. And so this is basically traditional Zulu music played on Western instruments. And we also bring in a bit of a Western flair. And this next song is one of our own called Uyang Bambezela, Yewena Ntombi Tatazela Kangaka, Uyangithanda Yini.
Uyangithanda yini Wena ntombi tatazela kangaka uyangithanda yini I've been waiting for so long for the answer to my ever-fading proposal Don't you end these childish games and let's move on to the final level. Iwenantumba tatazela kanga uyangithanda yini. Iwenantumba tatazela kanga uyangithanda yini. Aiswala uyangibambezela aiswala uyangithanda belunqome. 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 Ubala phansi uyacisha vele unqome. Ubala phansi ngozwane, ubala phansi uyacisha vele unqome. Is it a yes or a honey? Do you love me? Should I let you stay young, baby? Oh, love is clear, our love is great. Please don't let it go to waste. Stand to us, Iwenantumba tatazela kanga uyangithanda yini. Iwenantumba tatazela kanga uyangithanda yini. Ubala phansi ngozwane, ubala phansi uyacisha vele unqome. Ubala phansi ngozwane, ubala phansi uyacisha vele unqome. Aiswala uyangibambezela aiswala uyangithanda vele unqome. Aiswala uyangibambezela aiswala uyangithanda vele unqome.
Thank you so much for the music. Indeed, Susan has written there on the chat that we need music this time. We need poetry, we need music, because it's about dealing with our feelings during the crisis. Music and poetry teaches us how to understand the world and how to appreciate the world. It also teaches us basically how to self-reflect. So it's important during this time that we build resilience, and our teachers are teaching us music. Our teachers are teaching us poetry, and they sharpen us, they make us to be bright. Thank you so much to Katasi and Makringa from Mpangeni in the Zululand in South Africa. So now, as part of the segment where we're talking about the future we want, the future that we have to reimagine, given the fact that the teachers we are leading in a crisis and we have to come up with responses and solutions. I want to now introduce to you to our chairperson of the Africa region of EI, Corporate Christian Adepoku. He will then be presented through a video, and I hope we can listen. Thank you.
Fellow unionists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen across the globe, with great pleasure, I welcome everyone who has joined this very important event on the occasion of World Teachers' Day, this 5th of October 2020. This year's World Teachers' Day occurs amidst COVID-19 pandemic that has affected nations all over the world, and Africa not least of all. The challenges are many and cannot be overemphasized. Evidence from the EI Africa survey launched early today shows that schools were closed and face-to-face schooling was suspended in most African countries. Various alternatives have been tried to fill the learning gap, including online learning, radio and television broadcasts, and social media. But none of these can replace in-school teaching and learning. The pandemic has changed the world in very significant ways, and we need to prepare ourselves for a world with new normal, a normal in which the right to education of every child is secured, a normal in which teacher leadership is inevitable in providing alternatives on educating the young in the midst of the crisis, of ensuring equity by supporting the marginalized, a normal of reopening schools without further spread of the pandemic. As Education International Africa, we have expressed hope for a future without COVID-19 in our educators for reopening of schools and education institutions. The teaching fraternity calls for a clear policy guidelines to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and social dialogue mechanism that ensures continuous engagement with teachers and education support personnel through their representative organizations. Such dialogue is essential in developing and implementing effective safety and health measures and in coming up with decisions related to school closure and reopening. Thorough cleaning and fumigation of the schools and education environment, including classrooms, staff rooms, toilet, and other amenities should be undertaken before resumption of classes and regular cleaning assured thereafter. We urge government to ensure the provision of a safe and healthy teaching and learning environment that includes adequate running water and sanitation for all schools and education institutions, including soap and hand sanitizers. Physical and social distancing must be observed in learning and teaching spaces, and personal protective equipment, including face masks, should be provided in all schools for teachers, education support personnel, and students. Persons with underlying medical conditions in the school's community must be supported, and testing of teachers, education support personnel, and students should be available free of charge. Authorities should also ensure that temporary isolation rooms and sick bays run by health professionals are available for educators and students who may test positive for COVID-19 while in the school's premises. Government should take measures to ensure that the return of all children, including girls, boys, children with disabilities, refugees, and migrants to school. Moreover, government should ensure that more teachers and education support personnel are recruited to handle extra classes and provide the requisite support and services to meet the new conditions created by COVID-19. Adequate funding should be provided to recruit more teachers and ensure decent salaries and working conditions, including overtime pay, where such arrangements have been agreed with education unions. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to stress that the leadership of teachers in this crisis and in the future is paramount and must be recognized. We must ensure that this occasion of World Teachers' Day rekindles our resolve to strengthen the status and capacity of teachers for the future we want. Thank you.
Thank you, President of Africa region, for the message of support, but also for recognizing the work of the teachers and the recommendations that you are making. Now I will hand over to my comrade and my friend, Mariam, to facilitate the next program or the next line in terms of this particular segment where we are dealing with the future we want as the teachers. Thank you, Mariam. Take over.
Merci beaucoup, chers collègues. Nous allons maintenant recevoir avec plaisir Madame Dr Koubamboli Bari, rapporteure spéciale des Nations Unies pour les droits à l'éducation, sur l'avenir que nous voulons. Docteur, vous avez la parole. Docteur Bari. Chers collègues, nous allons certainement donc passer à Monsieur le ministre, notre ancien président Toulas, pour son message. Camarade Toulas, welcome. What's wrong?
Leaders and representatives of teacher unions across the continent, friends, fellow participants, teachers and comrades. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this important discussion on World Teachers' Day. I don't need to remind this audience of the importance of acknowledging the vital importance of the work performed by the teachers across the world on a daily basis. They are key to providing knowledge and skills to our children in a rapidly changing economic and technological environment. They are part of the wider socialization and social protection of our children, often working in difficult conditions of poverty, war, and disease. The World Teachers' Day takes place against a backdrop of global devastation wrought by the coronavirus pandemic and economic destruction which came in its wake. The theme of today, Teachers Leading the Crisis, Reimagining the Future, reminds us of two things. Teachers are also leaders in their schools where they bear responsibility for the well-being of learners, but also in communities, especially where there is poverty and high levels of illiteracy. Teachers are called upon to be ambassadors and educators in the fight against COVID-19. The theme also reminds us that the pandemic has speeded up the technological changes that were already underway. What we often refer to as the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the 4IR, it brings with its great opportunities. Indeed, that is why we are able to hold this commemoration through the virtual technologies. But like the previous industrial revolutions, it comes with the potential for social upheaval as the nature of work is transformed. Teachers need to be part of that debate, reimagining the future. It will impact what is taught and how. Of course, teachers only lead if they receive the necessary support. It is the responsibility of government to stand by all their citizens during times of crisis. This is about protecting our children and protecting education as the main driver of the future socio-economic well-being of our people. In practical terms, this means governments must ensure that teachers and citizens are paid or receive income support during the pandemic and any lockdown. Government must inspect schools and workplaces and enforce health and safety regulations required to protect against the virus. This is particularly the case as learners return to school. It also means that we provide teachers and learners with necessary PPEs. I also believe that governments cannot beat the pandemic on their own. Now is the time for solidarity, bringing together all social partners, labor, communities, employers and governments, not only to combat the virus, but as we build our economies to ensure that we tackle the systemic problems of unemployment, poverty and inequality for a better future for all. Thank you and stay safe.
Hi, my name is Dr. David Moini Masende. I'm the Minister for Basic and Senior Secondary Education for Sierra Leone and the Chief Innovation Officer as well for the government of Sierra Leone. I've been recently appointed to serve as the Chair of the Advisory Board for the GEM report to UNESCO. It's a privilege and honor to serve in this capacity. And on this particular day, October 5th, World Teachers Day, I am honored to send a message to our colleagues who are teachers who serve us every day. Teachers are critical in all times, but particularly during these COVID times, it's become important, and we've been able to understand that teachers and teaching cannot be overstated. The value of teachers and teaching cannot be overstated. We've seen how teachers have continued providing learning remotely. We've seen how teachers have to reinvent and relearn new skills such that they can continue to provide education service delivery. We've seen how the combination of radio, hard materials, learning materials, and TV and online learning have become mainstay. We've seen how teachers who are also care providers generally, how their role of care provision have been underscored and understated, particularly as we reopen schools during COVID. In Sierra Leone, we opened schools partially at some point when we had a crisis at our hands, when the numbers were very high. And the role of teachers was very important in terms of making sure that our children are safe, they are protected, and they continue learning. And when we opened schools for about 5 weeks, we had zero transmission of COVID. Again, thanks to our teachers who are our frontline workers. Our teachers have been frontline workers and they will continue to be frontline workers. So as we in the world get used to this new mainstay, we must understand that we cannot support our teachers more than we disregard. So we must understand that as teachers, so we must understand that as policymakers, as global leaders, as advocates, teachers play a critical and central role in everything that we do, not just from our classrooms, but for national development and for resilience and for how we rebound as a world. So today I want to share my profound appreciation and acknowledgement and thanks to all the teachers everywhere, those from Sierra Leone to Kathmandu, from Kathmandu to Khartoum, to Johannesburg, to every other region around this world. We thank you for your service. We appreciate you. We see you, and we see the sacrifice that you're making. And for us in Sierra Leone, one of the things that we're looking forward to is really the implementation of hybrid learning and teaching methodologies, where teaching is continuous from the classroom to the home, to the radio, to the TV, where teachers are given continuous professional development such that they're able to learn and also get professional development from the radio. The radio teaching program is not just for the pupils, but it's also for the teachers, where we supply radio materials and we give the teachers those radio content, and we give the teachers those digital devices such that they can continue to upskill. Because if we want to compete in the 21st century, if we want to develop problem solvers, we have to have our teachers get the right training and the right resources for them to be able to learn themselves and be critical 21st century problem solvers such that they can facilitate and impact that to our children. And that's what it is. We have to be able to support our teachers now and into the future, such that they themselves are able to respond, they themselves are able to be resilient, and they themselves are able to adapt to the realities that will meet us, such that our children can continue learning. Thank you very much, and happy World Teachers Day.
Thanks so much for the messages from the Minister. Now I want to present to you our President of Education International. What an honor, what a privilege to have both of you in this celebration, you and David, since you woke up very early in the morning. Susan, you were talking about democracy, you were talking about authoritarian, and I want to thank you so much, Susan, for being here. So how are teachers responding to this pandemic? As the president of EI, may you please address us around those particular issues, and we are really honored for you to have us. I know you need to sleep, but you are not going to sleep because you and David have got to take a lot of coffee. Welcome.
Thank you very, very much, Mugwena, for that such a lovely and warm welcome. And I have to say that it's my privilege to be here with you in your session on this fantastic day. And it's also fantastic for me to be following on from our previous EI President, Tulas Nexi, who of course is now your Minister for Education in South Africa. Colleagues and friends, it is my great pleasure to join you to celebrate this dedication of teachers to impact generations and nations the world over. Unlike previous years, today we honour teachers facing extraordinary circumstances occasioned by the COVID-19 pandemic ravaging the entire world. According to the UN, 1.6 billion students in 190 countries could not attend school because of the closures affecting 94% of the world's student population. This has reduced opportunities for access and retention of children in school, and more so the vulnerable, many of whom are found in Africa, girls and boys, children with disabilities and rural children, among others. Education International has taken significant measures to respond to the COVID-19 crisis in education. We've both educated and advocated, provided guidance and tools to our member organisations and governments. We've carried out surveys and run a series of blogs and webinars, all designed to support and empower our members to navigate the crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic should remind us of the essential role of teachers and education support personnel. Everyone has the duty to accord them the respect and support they deserve. This year's World Teachers' Day theme, Teachers Learning in Crisis, Reimagining the Future, fits in very well with our resolve as educators and unions to take the lead in our schools and communities. Educators are taking the lead everywhere. Teachers have had to come up with innovative but practical solutions to keep students engaged and learning while the schools were closed, using various media tools and platforms, including radio, television, the press, social media, take-home packages, and more. However, vast evidence from the EI survey launched earlier today shows that the vast majority of children in Africa have not been learning, mainly due to lack of digital infrastructure and electricity and the reality of poverty. So we owe our gratitude to all those teachers who have pushed on, doing all they can to support their students. Reimagining or reshaping the future cannot happen without educators. Teachers and education support personnel are not only policy implementers, but change agents. They prepare young people for work and for life. They impact communities and society at large. We therefore urge governments to engage in continuous social and policy dialogue with educators and their unions as the cornerstone of any successful education policy. Ensure the health and safety of education communities. Make equity a top priority. Support the physical and emotional well-being of educators and students, and trust the professionalism of educators. Educators need training, continuous professional development, decent salaries, and working conditions. This respect and support is fundamental to the future of our nations. As Education International and education unions, we stand ready to continue working with governments and partners to improve the status of this great profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much for the message. And indeed, the teachers need more. They need training, and we need to also train them whilst they're at the universities or colleges so that they can build resilience, so that we are able to deal with the crisis in the future. Thank you for stating clearly how the teachers are responding to the pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, comrades and friends, all over the world, and in particular in Africa, I want to bring back our special rapporteur on the right to education from the United Nations, Dr. Kumba Boli Berry, who will address us now. Welcome to Africa celebration of the World Teachers' Day.
Hi. Thank you. It's really a pleasure to participate to this wonderful space today with all the teachers and also the network who are supporting the work of the teachers and the work of education in our humanity. I want to speak in French. That's why I begin by saying thank you in English. Madame la Présidente de l'International de l'Éducation, Monsieur le Vice-président, Monsieur le coordonnateur de la région Afrique, Mesdames et Messieurs, en vos titres respectifs, je voudrais, en cette occasion solennelle de journée mondiale de l'enseignant et de l'enseignante, d'abord dire toute ma gratitude à l'International de l'éducation de nous avoir associés à cette célébration. C'est vraiment un message de gratitude, un message aussi de reconnaissance à vous en tant que réseau international, mais aussi en tant que réseau ayant des ramifications jusqu'au niveau de la base, au niveau des écoles, donc, et aussi des communes, mais aussi des régions, des provinces et au niveau national. Je voudrais vraiment vous féliciter pour votre capacité à mobiliser les enseignants au niveau mondial et à parler toujours d'une seule voix, malgré la diversité et malgré bien sûr souvent l'adversité. Parlant justement d'adversité, je voudrais parler de trois enjeux, de trois défis importants en ce qui concerne l'éducation aujourd'hui. Beaucoup d'intervenantes en ont déjà parlé. Pour moi, le premier défi par rapport à l'éducation aujourd'hui au niveau mondial, c'est la question d'accès à l'éducation. Et cette question d'accès, je voudrais juste, en tant que vraiment quelqu'un qui est commise pour le droit à l'éducation, insister sur le fait qu'avant la pandémie du Covid-19, il y avait 1 milliard d'êtres humains qui n'avaient pas la possibilité, bien sûr, d'accéder à leur droit à l'éducation. J'ai dit bien 1 milliard d'êtres humains. Et il y a 258 millions d'enfants et d'adolescents qui sont concernés. Et la majorité, ce sont bien sûr des femmes, ce sont des gens qui vivent en milieu rural, ce sont les réfugiés, les migrants, mais c'est aussi les personnes vivant en situation de handicap, mais c'est surtout les femmes et les filles, mais c'est aussi des groupes spécifiques comme les nomades, les pêcheurs, etc. Donc, pour moi, c'est important que le monde n'oublie pas que le Covid-19, c'est vrai, est venu fermer des salles de classe, fermer des centres d'alphabétisation, fermer des espaces de petite enfance, etc., etc. Mais qu'avant, bien sûr, cette pandémie, il y avait aussi ce monde. Et je voudrais justement demander à l'ensemble des gouvernements, dans leur façon de programmer, dans leur façon de faire ce dialogue politique, et particulièrement à l'éducation internationale, de ne pas oublier ces oubliés-là du monde par rapport à l'éducation. Le deuxième élément important pour moi, c'est toutes ces questions de qualité, et on parle de l'Afrique. C'est vrai, quelque part, aujourd'hui, dans une bonne partie, les études de l'UNESCO, mais aussi de la Banque mondiale et du Global Partnership for Education, en parlent et mettent sur la table hein, tout ce qui a été fait en termes de données statistiques pour dire que souvent, les enfants sont en classe pour une dizaine d'années, mais c'est la moitié à peine de ces enfants qui sortent de là avec un minimum de capacité et de compétences de la vie. Et ça, je pense que c'est un enjeu fondamentalement important. Il y a aussi les questions de gouvernance. C'est vrai, souvent, on en parle. Et cette question de gouvernance, le système éducatif aujourd'hui, il est tout le temps centralisé. Il faut que le système éducatif se décentralise. Il faut qu'on donne de l'espace aux écoles, aux régions, aux provinces et aux communes, mais surtout donner l'espace aux acteurs fondamentaux du système éducatif, qui sont les apprenants et les apprenantes, mais aussi qui sont les enseignants et les enseignantes et leur réseau. C'est ça la gouvernance du système éducatif. Il faut donner la parole, il faut permettre l'expression des réseaux d'enseignants et des réseaux des apprenants et des apprenantes. C'est fondamentalement important. Et pour moi, un des défis aussi essentiels, c'est justement la ligne. Le droit à l'éducation, c'est de dire il faut une éducation publique de qualité, mais aussi gratuite et inclusive. C'est ça la ligne. Mais on voit aujourd'hui de plus en plus qu'en Afrique, il y a une sorte de tendance à la privatisation de l'éducation de base jusqu'à l'enseignement supérieur. Dans certains cas, c'est entre 10, 20 et des fois, on va jusqu'à 40-50% qui sont occupés par l'espace de la privatisation. Je crois que c'est un enjeu fondamentalement important pour le futur et particulièrement important pour les enseignants et les enseignantes. L'autre dimension aussi importante, je pense que pour moi, en termes de défi, c'est la capacitation des enseignants. Pratiquement tout le monde en a parlé. On constate qu'il y a une sorte de baisse. On prend juste des chiffres proposés par l'UNESCO. On voit qu'en 2013, en Afrique, par exemple, on était presque à 70%, à plus de 70% d'enseignants et d'enseignantes qui ont pu bénéficier de la formation. Mais en 2005, ils étaient presque 78% qui ont bénéficié de cette formation, de cette capacitation avant de démarrer, bien sûr, les cours. Ça veut dire qu'il y a cette tendance à la baisse, que ce soit pour le continent africain ou le continent asiatique, particulièrement la tendance à la baisse pour la formation des enseignants, leur formation initiale, mais la formation continue surtout, qui va faire appel à la qualité, est en train de baisser. Et ça, je crois que c'est un enjeu fondamentalement important sur lequel il va falloir se positionner. Toutes les questions aussi de gouvernance, mais aussi de financement de l'éducation. Des fois, en Afrique, ce n'est pas parce qu'il manque des ressources financières, mais c'est la priorisation. Là où on doit mettre les ressources financières, c'est quoi la priorité? Et cette priorité, il faut qu'elle soit décidée, concertée avec les réseaux des enseignants. Et je voudrais vraiment encore dire, par rapport à la gouvernance de l'éducation en Afrique, les enseignants et leurs réseaux ne sont pas des adversaires au gouvernement des Africains, au gouvernement africain, des pays africains. Il faut absolument que ce message soit entendu par les gouvernements des pays africains. C'est un appel solennel que je lance au gouvernement des pays africains. S'il vous plaît, concertez-vous avec les réseaux des enseignants et des enseignantes. Ce ne sont ni des adversaires, ni des ennemis. Ce sont plutôt des acteurs complémentaires dans le domaine de l'éducation, mais ce sont des acteurs visionnaires qui connaissent bien le système éducatif et qui sont capables de vous conseiller, qui sont capables de s'organiser pour innover, qui sont capables de prendre les enjeux en charge si vous êtes capable de les écouter. Si vous les écoutez, vous aurez de la qualité. Si vous les écoutez, vous aurez la meilleure des gouvernances des systèmes éducatifs au niveau du continent africain. Ça, c'est un message solennel que je voudrais vraiment lancé au gouvernement des pays africains. Et enfin, je voudrais aussi dire, personne, je dis bien personne dans ce monde, ni les familles, ni les apprenants, ni les apprenantes, encore ni les communautés, je dis bien ni les États, ou les gouvernements, ou les institutions, ou les organisations nationales ou internationales, je dis personne. Personne ne peut réellement payer à un enseignant, à une enseignante, ce qu'elle apporte à notre humanité. Parce que l'enseignant et l'enseignante prennent des êtres humains souvent à un bas âge et essayent de les modeler et de leur donner ce qu'ils ont de meilleur en eux. C'est leur savoir, c'est leur compétence, c'est leur capacité, mais c'est aussi leur amour. Et je pense que notre société a le devoir de reconnaître, mais surtout de magnifier cette fonction d'enseignant et cette fonction des enseignantes. Je voudrais vraiment encore vous souhaiter une bonne fête, une bonne commémoration de cette journée des enseignants et des enseignantes au niveau mondial, et je voudrais vous dire toute ma solidarité et que les États et les institutions doivent s'organiser pour vous aider aussi à prendre en charge toutes ces questions psychosociales, mais toutes ces questions aussi de santé mentale dans ce contexte qui est un contexte particulier et il faut absolument le mettre en exergue. Je voudrais encore vous féliciter, les enseignants et les enseignantes du monde, et particulièrement les enseignants et les enseignantes de l'Afrique, où je sais que les défis sont encore plus importants et on vous attend vraiment. Et chaque jour que Dieu fait, on vous attend dans les salles de classe, mais on vous attend aussi dans l'utilisation de la nouvelle technologie. Et je sais que ce n'est pas facile, mais vous avez la solidarité internationale pour assumer votre responsabilité, parce que c'est la responsabilité que vous avez, c'est la responsabilité qui va permettre de construire le meilleur des mondes dans notre humanité. Merci beaucoup.
Colleagues, one of the critical issues facing us in the midst of the pandemic is the crushing burden of debt faced by so many countries. Former UK Prime Minister Gordon Brown said recently that failure by leading developed and developing nations to organise a global COVID-19 recovery plan is a potential death sentence for the world's poor. Solving the debt crisis to build and sustain a vibrant public sector has long been a concern of Education International and our member organisations throughout the region. This is an issue of great concern also to our next guest, His Excellency Macky Sall, President of the Republic of Senegal. President Sall was first elected in April 2012 after serving his nation as Prime Minister, President of the National Assembly and as a Mayor. Throughout his career, he's championed the economic and social development of his country. As education unions, we strongly believe that it is through continuous engagement and dialogue between teacher organisations and governments that we can build stronger education systems. Educators, both in Africa and globally, feel deeply honoured to have this supportive message from President Sall.
Monsieur le Secrétaire général de l'International de l'Éducation, Monsieur le coordonnateur de l'International de l'Éducation pour la région Afrique, Mesdames, Messieurs les responsables de syndicats d'enseignants, chères enseignantes et enseignants d'Afrique, à l'aimable invitation de la région Afrique de l'International de l'Éducation, je suis heureux de m'adresser à vous à l'occasion de la Journée mondiale de l'enseignant. Depuis 1994, cette journée est commémorée en souvenir de la signature de la recommandation conjointe OIT-UNESCO de 1966 sur la condition du personnel enseignant. Ce texte de référence définit entre autres les droits et responsabilités des enseignants, les normes de leur recrutement et de leur formation initiale et continue. Il fixe également les règles de leur emploi et perfectionnement professionnel, ainsi que les conditions
de l'enseignement et de l'apprentissage. Le 5 octobre marque aussi l'adoption en 1997 de la recommandation de l'UNESCO relative à la condition du personnel enseignant du supérieur et aux droits et responsabilités du personnel de recherche et d'enseignement. Le thème de cette édition, enseignants, leaders en temps de crise et façonneurs d'avenir, reflète pleinement le contexte de la sévère pandémie Covid-19. À l'instar des autres secteurs d'activité, les systèmes éducatifs sont gravement perturbés à travers le monde, mettant à rude épreuve les gouvernements, enseignants, élèves et parents. C'est toute la famille scolaire, publique et privée qui est ainsi atteinte. Mais devant l'épreuve, nous devons rester résilients et combatifs parce qu'en tout temps et en toutes circonstances, l'éducation est une priorité de premier ordre. Elle ne peut pas attendre parce que c'est la lumière du savoir qui façonne l'esprit, illumine la pensée et l'action, éclaire la voie du progrès et repousse les ténèbres de l'ignorance et de l'obscurantisme. Dans le combat de la lumière contre les ténèbres, ce sont les enseignants qui sont à la ligne de front, surtout en ces temps inédits de crise sanitaire, économique et sociale. C'est pourquoi je salue avec respect tous les enseignants et enseignantes qui, dans un bel élan de patriotisme et avec un sens élevé des responsabilités, ont assuré la continuité du service public de l'éducation, parfois dans des conditions difficiles. Ce faisant, ils contribuent de façon remarquable à la réalisation de l'objectif de développement durable numéro 4, visant à assurer l'accès de tous à une éducation de qualité sur un pied d'égalité et promouvoir les possibilités d'apprentissage tout au long de la vie. Au Sénégal, nous avons pu relever ce défi grâce à un plan de résilience éducative à 3 composantes: le protocole sanitaire, le dispositif pédagogique et la concertation avec les organisations syndicales d'enseignants. Avec la reprise des cours des classes d'examen en présentiel, le support technologique, notamment des cours en ligne, la plateforme audiovisuelle et la fourniture de matériel didactique pour les classes de transition, nous avons pu sauver l'année scolaire et organiser les examens. Je voudrais dire ma fierté et rendre hommage au corps enseignant et à tous les acteurs du système éducatif, aux autorités pédagogiques, administratives et locales et aux parents d'élèves. Notre rôle en tant que pouvoir public, c'est aussi ma volonté constante, c'est de continuer à soutenir le secteur éducatif à l'échelle nationale, africaine et internationale. C'est le sens de nos efforts consistant à consacrer à l'éducation 26% du budget de l'État. C'est le sens de mon engagement au sein du comité des 10 chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine, champion de l'éducation, de la science et de la technologie, sous la présidence du Sénégal. C'est enfin le sens de mon engagement dans le partenariat mondial pour l'éducation et de l'accueil à Dakar en février 2018 de la 3e conférence sur le financement de l'éducation pour mobiliser 3,1 milliards de dollars sur la période 2018-2020. Si l'éducation a un coût, elle n'a pas de prix. Et aucun investissement n'est de trop pour construire des écoles, former et recruter des enseignants de qualité et bâtir des systèmes éducatifs performants
y compris par l'apprentissage au métier. En effet, l'école ne doit pas seulement suivre une logique élitiste basée sur le culte du diplôme. Elle doit aussi mieux répondre aux besoins du marché par une formation professionnelle et technique adéquate. Et par son idéal d'inclusion sociale et d'égalité des genres, l'école doit continuer à donner la chance à tous, garçons, filles et apprenants vivant avec un handicap. Nos défis sont donc immenses. Mais plus grande est encore notre volonté de les relever avec votre précieux soutien, vous, soldats du savoir, enseignants et enseignantes d'Afrique et du monde. Je vous adresse mes chaleureuses félicitations et vous souhaite une excellente journée de l'enseignant.
Thank you so much. I just want to take this opportunity to share with all our organizations in Africa that the executive summary of the survey is now available on the original website. We urge you to access the executive summary of the survey so that you can use that as part of the engagement with the national governments and local or in school authorities all over in Africa, because it's important that we address the issues that are there. From my side, I want to thank you so much for being with us here, and I want to hand over to my comrade, my friend, Mariam, to then proceed with the program. Please accept our survey. As we have indicated, the full report will also be uploaded once it has been translated into our 3 official languages. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, camarade, vice-président de l'International de l'éducation. Après ces importants messages, nous avons le plaisir d'accueillir notre secrétaire général, le secrétaire général de l'International de l'éducation, David Edwards, pour les remerciements et son allocution de clôture. David, welcome.
Thank you, Marième. Thank you, Mugwena. Thank you, colleagues. I'm both honored and humbled to be able to bring closing remarks and thank everyone from this session. I think for all of us who are viewing and hearing firsthand on the front lines what teachers and their unions are doing in Africa up against great challenges and great odds, we now have no excuse to say it's not because they're not trying. It's because, quite frankly, the political will and the resourcing necessary has just not been made available. I would like to thank President Macky Sall for his words about the need to end the external debt crisis, which is crippling governments and not being able to make their public service payments to pay and fully pay for public education. As Special Rapporteur Boliberi also said, as we've heard from Tulis, as we've heard from others, the fact is that the money is there. But the fact is also that austerity policies and bad advice from the international financial institutions have crippled and further imperiled our attempts to be able to recover from the COVID-19 crisis. This is no longer acceptable. We at Education International join with all of those, Global Partnership for Education and others, calling for fully funding what's necessary to achieve Education 2030 SDG 4. That means taking those stopping debt payments all the way through 2021. That means 20% of GDP for education. That means companies that are operating in the African continent must pay their fair share of taxes. We can't have a time when airline bailouts are more than all of the financing in its entirety for a region. This is the time for international solidarity. You have heard the voices of our members. You have heard the frontline desires to make a difference in the lives of students. Democratic organizations standing on the front lines representing their profession, working tirelessly. not always with the right tools, not always with enough time, and certainly not with the trust that they so rightly deserve. So with that, I would like to thank everyone from EIRAF, from Dennis, all of you who've put this program together, this whole session on World Teachers' Day from Africa. It has been an inspiration to us all. We stand in full solidarity with you. On behalf of all of us here and all of us everywhere else, happy World Teachers' Day, colleagues. We're with you, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you.
intombi angithulanga phambela zelashona mabano baba ngewashela we intombi angithulanga bayikhomba le bayikhombe towe bayikhomba le bayikhombe towe iyatoza we isizoqoma iyatoza isizoqoma qoma mina ngane bayo Wishelsa muzoqomanini wishelsa qoma mina wishelsa muzoqomanini wishelsa qoma mina wishelsa muzoqomanini wishelsa qoma mina Hawlegalele umama uyasibhekela hawlegalele legalala hawlegalele umama uyaswashela hawlegalele legalele kanyabantu hawlegalele umama uyasibhekela hawlegalele sho Shelisa Koma mina kodwa ngane ba Koma mina Shelisa Wishelsa muzoqomanini wishelsa Koma mina wishelsa muzoqomanini wishelsa Koma mina wishelsa muzoqomanini wishelsa Koma mina
Wow.
That was so
That
good.
was that was a great show.
Kadasian Madinga.
Hi, David.
Hi, Hollis.
I've really been enjoying myself.
Nice
Have
to
you?
see you. I really am. I'm feeling very inspired and full of hope.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of being a teacher.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just a fantastic region, a fantastic program. And I can't say enough good things about it. But we have to end because we have to continue our journey, don't we?
Yeah, there's more to come. And I think we're going to start with a couple of messages, aren't we?
I believe we are. Do you want to set those up?
Yes. Well, I haven't heard them before. I think you have, because this is a repeat of very good messages from two very important people in the world at this moment. We have a message from the Director General of the World Health Organization, very busy man. And we also have a message from the chair of the Global Partnership for Education. So let's listen to those two messages.
Let's listen.
Dear David, dear colleagues and friends, World Teachers' Day is an opportunity to honor our teachers and to reflect on how we will meet the challenges of the future. The COVID-19 pandemic has upended our lives and livelihoods, health systems and societies, and it has reminded all of us just how important schools and teachers are. At the height of the pandemic, over 90% of all students globally were out of school, including my own kids. In the face of this global crisis, teachers are responding with exceptional creativity and dedication to ensure their students' education can continue. Through remote classrooms, distributing meals and books, or helping students access an internet connection, teachers are playing a vital role in their communities. In some countries, schools have reopened. In others, they remain closed. To support countries in every situation, WHO, UNESCO, and UNICEF recently published updated guidance on how to keep students and teachers safe at school. Building back better must include adapting education systems to make them more resilient in the face of risk. For everything it has taken from us, the pandemic has reminded us of a simple truth, that health and education are two of the most precious commodities in life. To all teachers, I have a simple message. Thank you.
World Teachers' Day is an opportunity for us all to celebrate teachers and the instrumental role they play in the learning and development of children around the world. This year, teachers deserve the spotlight more than ever. You have faced unprecedented challenges as the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted classroom learning around the world. COVID-19 has not only affected health systems, but school systems as well. Nearly 1.6 billion students around the world have had their education disrupted. Hundreds of millions remain shut out of their classrooms. Throughout these challenges, teachers have worked tirelessly to keep students learning. You have been there for your students through school closures, helped them adapt to distance learning, and provided them with a sense of normality and safety in these very uncertain times. In lower income countries, where the Global Partnership for Education concentrates our support, teachers have innovated to use whatever technology is available. You are teaching over the radio, by SMS, and even distributing printed assignments to keep your students learning. You have stepped up to connect with vulnerable students and help them stay on the path of education, especially girls, who are at the highest risk of dropping or being forced out of school. In so many countries and communities, you are these children's last line of defence against a future of early marriage or child labour. The realities of distance learning have given the world a whole new appreciation for what teachers do every day. Your work, not only for children's learning, but for their well-being and growth, is vital to societies as a whole. You deserve recognition for that. You also deserve to be supported as you work to adapt to new challenges and help education systems Build Back Better. As part of GPE's COVID-19 response, we have provided funds to more than 50 lower-income countries to help ensure that teachers get the support they need during these unprecedented times. These funds are providing training, paying salaries, and helping equip classrooms to reopen safely. Teachers, you are some of the most important members of society. You inspire future generations and set them up for success. Your voice must be heard at every level of decision-making, and your well-being and safety is a top priority as we work to build better education systems together.
Two great messages, and I hope that all of you teachers out there take them to your heart. They say thank you, and they say you deserve recognition. You do. In a very short moment, we're going to move on to another region, or perhaps I should say a combination of the two regions that we've been in, Asia Pacific and Africa, because we are going to move to our Arabic-speaking countries, where we are going to be hosted by a great friend, a fantastic teacher, principal, and trade unionist, Mandal Hadif. I very much look forward to following that, and I hope that all of you will stay tuned and hear the stories from countries that have challenges now during COVID-19, but that also have lived through additional challenging times in the both recent years and more long-term period, but they never give up. So stay tuned and hear the voices from our Arab region. We'll be back in just a few minutes.